Geeks and geekettes, ladies and gentlemen, comic fans across the globe, from sea to shining sea, from pole to pole, this is Ask Chuck Dixon, where you, a comic book fan, comic book aficionado, or even casual looky-loo, get to ask me, a comic book writer of world renown, about what I do for a living, and that's right, comic books. Yes, you got Chuck Dixon on the line, and you can ask me anything you like. And if you watched a few of these episodes, you know I can be brutally candid. I sign no NDAs. I'll say whatever the hell I want to say. Before we go any further, why don't you join Spin Rack on Discord? Go to Discord and look for Spin Rack. And if you don't want to do that, you can always scan this little QR code here. I'll leave it up here for a few seconds for those of you. So you can run and get your phone and scan this QR code, or simply go back and hit pause. All right, SK, any insight on how you came about the story for Robin issue 81, The Obtuse Conundrum, featuring an actor who poses as a writer? Yeah, I reread this issue just to refresh my memory because it's been a while. My influence was the success of the Da Vinci Code at the time. When everybody was talking about the Da Vinci Code and the fabulous conspiracy theories portrayed within, and blah blah blah, and it was being discussed on television like a big time work of fiction, as well as possibly being based on truth for all those of you who like, Illuminati type stories. And the basic premise of this one is that the writer of this series of novels about conspiracies accidentally stumbles upon the real conspiracy. And there actually is a conspiracy that he's writing about. He's unaware of it. He thinks he made it all up, but the members of the conspiracy are out to kill him. And Robin, of course, is there to save the day, to save this guy's life. But, of course, there's a twist in the tale of the story, so that all is not quite as it seems by the conclusion. But, yeah, it was directly influenced by the success of Dan O'Brien's book. And, it just seemed like good grist. I thought, what if somebody was out to kill that guy for the stuff that he was writing about? And who would intercede? Another question from SK. I'm currently working my way through reading Warlord by Mike Grell. Have you any thoughts of writing this character? Actually, I did write this character. In the run on Green Arrow following Oliver Queen's death, Connor Hall kept responding to rumors that Oliver was still alive, much like Elvis. And he heard about this guy on this remote South Pacific island, and he travels there. And in the end, it turns out to be Travis Morgan, not Oliver Queen. That's an honest mistake. Both guys, white hair, goatee, and mustache. And, but, in the thing, primarily I wrote the story because I wanted to get dinosaurs into a story. And the island that Connor and Eddie Fires end up on is the island that the same island established in DC continuity as the War the Time Forgot, the old World War II stories in Star Spangled War comics that I used to like as a kid, that featured GIs versus dinosaurs. And I kind of explain the island in continuity, that it phases in and out of our reality, which is why it never appears on any maps, why it seems to be lost in time and space. This entire island is lost in time and space. And anyway, Connor has a terrific adventure on this island, lots of fighting and shooting and running and velociraptors, and ultimately finds out that this is not his dad, but Travis Morgan, whom he rescues. And I never did anything more with the Travis Morgan character because I felt it's Mike Grell's character. I'm not going to do anything with this guy. I just wanted to have him appear in a story and bring him back into continuity, which maybe Mike appreciated. I'll never know. JMB USA, he's got a little bit of he wants to take the platform here. He's taking the podium. He says, I'm interested in the variances and mechanics of contracts and royalties, how a publisher and a creator can establish a more engaging and prosperous ground to maintain and sustain their properties. I suppose even more specifically as it relates to the handling of a given IP and the branding, etc., etc. But even the simple boilerplate contracts attract my curiosity. And if I recall correctly, you've stated before that the Eclipse contracts were one, if not the best you've ever dealt with. I'm curious if you could share those. I'm in the process of establishing my own microscopic publishing enterprise, and I have been seeking out templates and guides, and it seems like such a murky and opaque legal landscape, and I've only ever been able to track down bits and scraps of older documents that don't shed much light on the more precise depth of the text. Surely I can cobble together something proper, as I would then strive to align with an attorney that's savvy and operating within the media industry. But I inquire this of you as I think that I could emulate a known classic positive, that I could manage to avoid initial negative pitfalls of such otherwise entry-level paperwork. So basically, you'd like to see a copy of the Eclipse contract, of any Eclipse creator-owned contract. Before I delve any further into that, when I sign a contract, and I generally ask for lots of revisions, because most contracts presented to you by a publisher as their first try are they want everything. They want everything. And I'm never willing to give away everything. And I'm never willing to give anything away in perpetuity. They always seem to leave out termination clauses. Like if I decide to end our deal, I'm allowed to do that. Or if the entity in which I've signed the contract goes out of business or ceases to exist, all rights revert to me. All those kind of things. Well, they're all in the Eclipse contract. And it's important. It's also important to not accept contract language that is dense in legalese, that you can insist that this be rewritten in plain English. Like, what does this mean? Stop with the heretofores and all the rest of it, and just say what it means. And don't sign a contract till you've got everything you want in it. And as I said before, don't give away everything. Now, I'm perfectly willing to send out, to scan an Eclipse contract. I'll probably redact a few things in it, but I'll send out a standard Eclipse contract to anybody who wants one. But as usual, if I'm going to give something away, I want you to do something in return. It's very, very simple. We've done this before, you and I, most of us, a lot of us here at Ask Chuck Dixon. I want you to contribute some money to St. Jude's Children's Research Hospital. If you don't know anything about St. Jude's, it is a hospital for desperately ill children. Children who they're facing death. Let's be quite frank. And to help them out with whatever their malady is, it requires just a boatload of money that so many of these children's parents don't have. Well, the thing about St. Jude's Children's Research Hospital, and it is a top hospital with some of the most talented medical staff in the world. Surgeons, diagnosticians, technicians, radiologists, pathologists, all the rest. Everything you would want if your child was sick. These are the best. These are the aces. These are the studs. But the thing is, no parent ever receives a bill. These children are treated gratis by, as I said, some of the most talented medical professionals in the world. It is, even if you don't want a copy of an Eclipse contract, they are worthy of your contribution. Anything you can send them, $5, $20. But what I want you to do is, if you want a copy of an Eclipse contract, I'm more than happy to send you one. Contribute a couple of bucks to St. Jude's, and then email me at brunobookstore@gmail.com. Let me know you did it. If you want to provide proof, that's fine, but we'll go on the honor system, and I will send you a scan of an Eclipse contract so you can see the most wonderful, most fabulous, creator-owned comic book contract ever written by my buddy D. Mullaney. So there you have it. And also JMB ads. And aside from all that mess, I just read your 2 Sidewinders books, Snake Hand and La Gringa, fun reads. Well, thank you. Thank you for the plug as well. Snake Hand and La Gringa, published by Castalia House, are available through Amazon. And I have written a third, or I'm halfway through writing a third Sidewinders book. And I'm going to get back to it probably in the new year and get it done. So you might see it around March or April. It is called Gallows. And let's move on to the next question. John Bua, my good buddy John Bua. Can you separate the art from the artist? Does the behavior or the politics of an artist sour you on their work? I don't give a rat's about somebody's personal politics. If that's your politics, those are your politics. If you want to discuss politics with me, bring it on. I'll discuss them with you. Will we be friends? Possible associates? Possible collaborators after our discussion? Well, I don't care. It's up to you. You know, if you think, oh, you are such a repulsive or reactionary, right-wing, Genghis Khan, son of a bee, I don't want to work with you anymore. Well, that's up to you. But you can be a flaming commie, and I've worked with them, as long as you can meet a deadline, and you're talented, and you got the chops, you know, if I want to work with you, I'll work with you. I don't give a damn what you do behind closed doors. I really don't care. It does not matter to me. All that matters to me is the end product. That's the way it used to be in comics. We didn't care. We fought like cats and dogs over lunches and on long car rides to summits and things like that. And then once it was time to get down to work, we got down to work. You know, respected each other and everything else. As I always said, if you earned your opinion, I don't care if you're polar opposite from me. I don't care if we have zero common ground. If you earned your opinion through your own life experience and your own thoughtful examination of the universe, then I've got all the respect in the world for you, even if I don't agree with anything you say. If you learned your opinion, then we're in a different place. If someone told you what to think, or you were indoctrinated, or whatever, you really need to take another look at what you believe. And you may come to the same conclusions, and that's fine. But don't learn your opinion, earn your opinion. You know, base it on what you actually see around you in the real world, not what you glean from the Twitterverse. John Bua twin spin. I just love that picture. Will your Italian Conan comics ever be reprinted in English? I don't think anybody remembers I did any Italian Conan comics. That's the problem. I think these are just lost somewhere. Maybe they'll be collected in Europe. I don't know. But maybe Titan will get around to them, because there's I think about 15 issues that were published by Marvel Italia after Marvel lost the Conan license. So it's quite a bit of material. That's an omnibus full of material right there. So maybe Titan will get around to it. I'm sure that their collections of Savage Sword are profitable, and these would be a super edition. I mean, a lot of fans would want to read these because these are brand new Conan, even though they're decades old. They're brand new Conan stories to English language readers who weren't aware they existed. So happy hunting looking for them. I'm looking for a few of these myself. So we may be outbidding each other on eBay at some point. Okay, Crenshaw FAO. I've thought up a really cool setup and action sequence, but don't have a story to put it in. Do you ever come up with great ideas, but can't figure out what to do with it? Do you build stories from action sequences, or does the action build from the story? I tend to think of the action first, come up with some crazy action setup or scene setup, and then, file it away in my head or write it down. Very rarely write it down. I usually just file it away in my head. My theory is that if I file something away in my head and forget about it, it probably wasn't worth remembering. But as I get older, that's probably less and less true. I forget a lot of stuff. Like conversations I had 2 days ago. We had lunch together. We did? What did I order? Anyway, you come up with every writer works differently. You may want to write a story and then figure out the action as you go along. Me, you generally start with a big action set piece. where, either for the opening or where I'm going. I mean, I have an idea of a series of action set pieces, and try to keep them interesting in interesting locales, interestingly paced. The action set pieces that tell you something about the characters, that advance the story, they don't interrupt the story, and such like that. Now, a prime example of coming up with the scenarios first and the movie second is the movie North by Northwest. If you've never seen it, you really need to see it. It's a fun Hitchcock flick. It's one of his most successful at the box office, and basically features Cary Grant as an everyman who gets mistaken for a international spy, and then is in all kinds of trouble because a whole bunch of people want to know what he knows, and because he's not the spy, he doesn't know anything, and they're basically out to kill him. If they have no use for him, so he's on the run from this cabal of secret agents, and not getting a whole lot of help from the intelligence agencies here in the United States because they kind of want to see what he exposes as he's on the run. So they just sort of leave him on his own, running around like a chicken with his head cut off. And how the story was constructed is an interesting story in itself. Hitchcock had taken on the adaptation of a novel, The Wreck of the Merry Deer, and he was going to make it into a film. And he brought on board Ernest Lehman, who was a screenwriter and novelist, a big guy in the thriller world. And the two of them spent, a few weeks fooling around with how they would structure The Wreck of the Merry Deer, which eventually was made into a film, not by Hitchcock. An excellent film. Charlton Heston and Gary Cooper. You should check it out. But they didn't make the movie because they got bored. They got bored with the project. And Hitchcock began to talk about the ultimate thriller because Hitchcock needed a box office hit. Vertigo, which he considered his masterpiece, many people consider his masterpiece, had flopped at the box office. And some of the, veneer was coming off of Hitchcock's reputation. He really needed a box office hit. And he wanted to do the ultimate thriller. And he started talking to Lehman about all these crazy action set pieces and suspense set pieces that he had thought up over the years. And he made a list for Lehman. And Lehman said, well, why don't we write a screenplay incorporating as many of these as we can? And they were crazy. I mean, one of the ones that does not appear in North by Northwest is someone is ice fishing, and they hook something and they pull the line up, and it's a human hand. That does not appear in North by Northwest, but this is one of the gruesome set pieces that Hitchcock had thought of. So all of the things, the murder at the UN, the famous airplane scene in the cornfield, the Mount Rushmore scene, and a number of other of these, the drunken driving down a winding country road scene, all of these set pieces from North by Northwest were thought of as isolated bits that then Lehman worked into a story. Now, what Lehman's job was to create this character that Cary Grant plays, this charming everyman. And hard to imagine Cary Grant as an everyman, but Cary Grant could convince you of anything. so Cary Grant's just an everyman, and then set up the bad guys, the suspense, the humor, and all the rest of it you've got to bring to a story. The heavy lifting of doing a story. Thinking of crazy action scenes is pretty easy. I mean, we all, well, not all of us, but writers, anybody who wants to be a writer, anybody who burns to be a storyteller, you're constantly coming up with fantasy scenarios you see in the world around you. What if that train fell off that bridge all of a sudden? I'm looking out over a city landscape. What if a gigantic, 8-legged creature appeared on the horizon? Blah, blah, blah. But then you've got to make, you can't just have that. You can't just throw that out there all on its own, because why would we care? So you've got to come up with the characters you care about and a reason for them being, and you set them in motion, and you got to have rising stakes and suspense and make them interesting, and hopefully have a little bit of humor here and there, just fully entertaining things. So you gotta you gotta do all that heavy lifting. You gotta figure out how do I get to this insane action sequence or suspense sequence. I don't have any roadmap for that. You got to do that on your own. RB Probst. In your latest ACD episode, you mentioned that Batman Legends of the Dark Knight story you did with Gary Kwapis wasn't published because DC considered it too controversial. Can you elaborate on why they thought that? Was it the subject matter itself or something art-related, too gory, too violent, etc.? And David Jordan asked the same thing. Have you or can you post the script of that unpublished story? I cannot. I don't have that script anymore. That is many hard drives ago. But I'll tell you how it started. I went to the movies to see New Jack City. New Jack City was part of a spate of, Menace to Society and films like that were made about the drug trade and how tough it was to grow up in a neighborhood in African American inner city, South Central and places like that. And part of New Jack City, which I found to be disappointing, part of it was the portrayal of this urban housing project, low-income housing project, that had been taken over by a drug gang and basically turned into a fortress. And watching the movie, I thought, well, this is what the movie's about. It's going to be about this fortress, and it really wasn't. And the story kind of meanders around. It's kind of lame. And they never really get back to, they never fully exploit that thing. I wanted to see a knockdown, drag out gang war within the confines of that projects building, or a raid, much like in the movie, The Raid. But that was not to be. So I thought, well, let me write that story as a one-off for Legends of the Dark Knight. And the story was called The Keep. I don't have any Batman artwork by Gary Kwapis, but this is as close as I can get, a cover he did for a Moon Knight thing. And so our editor was Archie Goodwin, and he greenlit it. He said, yeah, go ahead. I like that idea. That's pretty cool. And we went to work. And when it was done, Archie said, I can't publish this. And what my story is that Batman goes to, he's following leads on a murder, and it takes him to a low-income housing project, one of those, 20-story massive block buildings. And he runs into the scenario that I saw in New Jack City, which was, and in real life, where this building had basically been fortified. That's why the story was called The Keep. It's fortified by this gang to protect themselves from other gangs and to delay law enforcement should they ever show up one day. Well, in searching for clues and encountering bad guys inside this project, Batman gets shot. He gets shot and severely wounded. And there's no way out of this place. It's a maze. It's a labyrinth. And it's filled with people that want to kill him. And he basically knocks on the door of one of the apartments, and this little boy takes him in. The little boy's mother is at work. She works as a nurse overnight, and the boy's there by himself because there's no one to mind him. And it's this little boy who rescues Batman and allows him to, survive as well as continue his mission. And the problem came that Gary and I wanted to present this as it might have really happened in the real world. And what that meant is that Batman is the only white character in the story. Every other character in the story, good guys and bad guys, are African American. Because that's simply, Gary and I felt that's simply the way it would be in Gotham. You don't, and our experiences, Gary is from Detroit. I'm from Philadelphia. You don't really have a whole lot of diversity in those low-income housing project buildings. It's generally one minority or another dominating the entire building, and so that's the way we presented it. And Archie wasn't. Archie certainly had dealt with controversial material on his own in his own career, but he just thought it wouldn't fly with the upstairs at DC, so he didn't even present it to them. He just said, "I won't even show this to anybody upstairs, and we just can't publish it." Now, of course, Gary and I were paid for it, but regretfully, Archie said that we just maybe some other day. And as we well know, that day is not here. If anything, if we were to present the story today, we would probably have been, hounded down the street by a mob. So there you have it. I'd love to send you the script, but I don't. It's many, many hard drives ago. I do not have a copy of it anymore. I don't think Gary even has any of the artwork anymore. RB Prost again. If you were offered the chance to do a comic book biography of any musical act, solo act, or band, who would entice you into the job? Well, I did do a Kiss comic once. I was never a Kiss fan. And quite frankly, I got offered this job and it flummoxed me. I'm like, I don't know where to go with this. What can I do? And then finally, I said, can I just do like a Rankin Bass Christmas special with Kiss and just sort of blow it up? And they said, yeah, do that. So that's what I did. Now, I don't know if I'd want to do a story about a musical act or whatnot, but years ago when I worked for Eclipse, I told this story before in part. I asked Dean Mulaney why so many Eclipse comics so frequently featured either Marilyn Monroe or Elvis Presley on the cover. And Dean said because people who are fans of Marilyn Monroe and Elvis Presley will buy anything that they appear on, even if they're not comic book readers. If you put them on a cover, he says, I always see an increase in sales if we find a way to put Marilyn or Elvis on a cover. And so I said, well, why don't we just do an Elvis comic? And he goes, well, what would an Elvis comic be like? And I said, well, it would be the movies Elvis should have made. I said, Elvis in a Western as he appears here in Charo. Elvis as a private detective in Las Vegas. Elvis when he was in the army, embroiled in some sort of espionage behind the Iron Curtain. And I had this great artist at the time, Argentine artist that I wanted to use, Oscar Caprisco, who would have just done a terrific Elvis job, and it would have kept it in 60s period. Because Elvis made awful movies, and even Elvis knew that. My favorite Elvis quote of all time is, if you think watching a bad movie is hard, try being in one. He never got to make the movies he wanted to, with rare exceptions. One of them, he did make a great Western called Flaming Star, directed by Don Siegel. And he made a terrible Western at the very end of his movie career, Charo, which is a huge disappointment. And the reason why Presley never made another movie, he really wanted to make a violent Italian type Western. And in the end, Colonel Tom Parker had all of the violence cut out of it. So he just ended up with a mishmash, a mess, a tepid piece of crap. And Elvis was just so bummed by the whole thing. He just never wanted to make another movie because he really thought this will have people taking me seriously as an actor. And Elvis was a good actor. If he was in a good film, he could do it. He could bring it. I urge you to watch Flaming Star. He's very, very good in it. Very charismatic, and it's a cool movie. But anyway, I wouldn't really want to write about musical groups. Do musical bio or whatever. But it would be fun to do a series of stories featuring Elvis. Robert Dungato, do you collect toys made of your creation? I've seen them notice a few Bane figures in your shelf during an interview or another. Why not? I think I've got one of every Bane ever, except there's this really, really expensive statue from Sideshow I don't have yet. I do have some of their statues, but I don't have this last one they did. But yeah, if I see the action figures, I'll pick them up, or I hear about them. I got people like Scott Beatty who will alert me, like, "Hey, did you see this?" And no, I didn't. One of my favorites is that bobblehead of Bane breaking Batman's back. Yes, it's a bobblehead. It bobbles at the waist as well. It's pretty sick. And I have, I'm looking right now. I'm looking across the office. I've got figures of Tim Drake and Stephanie Brown as Batgirl. Stephanie Brown as Spoiler. You're going to say, hey, I didn't know there was a Spoiler action figure. There isn't. It was custom made for me by a friend, and so I even have a Nightwing, a Tad Ryerstad Nightwing made by the same guy. It's really cool. But yeah, I like looking around and seeing stuff I created as toys, because I like toys too. I'm a toy guy. I'm a toy geek. Ivan Aguila, how did you get away with creating Allergent Batman villain and couldn't get away with Captain Fear? I mean, Allergent is kind of a pathetic one, and Captain Fear is kind of pastiche. But in the end of the day, both are very themed villains. Do you recall any specific reaction for Allergent, or have any clue why he liked or tolerated one and hated the other? I guess what you mean is why did my editors like or tolerate one and not the other? Allergent was created as a one-off. I think I had him appear again when I did a No Man's Land story. I can't remember, but Allergent was a one-and-done character, directly inspired by the fact that at the time I was living in Pennsylvania, and I was suffering these god-awful allergic symptoms. My allergies were so bad that when my wife and I had our first child, she had to drive herself to the hospital for delivery because I could not see. My eyes were streaming. And it turned out that my main allergy was something called Timothy grass. And as it turns out, we were living in basically the mushroom farming area of Pennsylvania, the biggest mushroom farming area in the world. The world capital of mushroom growing is Kennett Square, Pennsylvania. We were living just outside, and we were living adjacent to a whole bunch of mushroom farms. And what do they grow to make the mulch for mushroom farms? Timothy grass. Fields and fields and fields of Timothy grass surrounded our house. I think we were on 5 acres, surrounded by 200 acres of Timothy grass. Our nearest neighbor was like 100 yards away. And we were living rural. And so that's the direct inspiration for Allergent. Allergent's thing was he was going around defoliating Gotham City. He was going to the parks and everything else and killing anything that grew because of his horrible allergies. He thought if I could just kill all of these plants, I wouldn't have to deal with any of this pollen anymore. And of course, this brings him into direct conflict with poison ivy. Here's a guy out killing plants. This is the issue, by the way. I think this might have run 2 issues. And so Batman has to go out not only to stop Allergent from, de-leafing every tree in Gotham, but also to save him from Poison Ivy, who's going to kill him. She's going to kill this guy. And that was really it. He was a one-off character. I never meant Allergent to stay around for a while. He was a gimmick. He was a gag. He was a MacGuffin for what is primarily a Poison Ivy story. So it sort of got me into, it got me into the Poison Ivy story without it simply being Poison Ivy threatens Gotham once again and Batman has to respond. This sort of gave a different take, a different beginning, a different way into the plot. So there you go. But Captain Fear I wanted to keep around because, as you know, I had plans for Captain Fear, but Scott Peterson and Darren Vincenzo, they did not like him. And no love for the skipper. Hey, if you want to contact me, as I said before, brunobookstore@gmail.com, brunobookstore@gmail.com. Send a few bucks to St. Jude's, and I'll send you a copy of an Eclipse contract for you to peruse. Also, while I got you, I still have, maybe 30 copies of My Sister Suprema #1, the Origin issue. It's a special 64-page comic album size. It's more like a European album size comic than a standard comic book, with card covers full color throughout. This is the first print iteration, and you can get it free by going to Subscribestar and signing up for the $5 tier at Chuck Dixon, Subscribestar Chuck Dixon. I'll have the link below. And you subscribe, and I'll send you a copy of this free of charge. Every month you're going to get digital goodies and stuff like that. Anybody who subscribes here will tell you that every once in a while you get a surprise package with some actual physical media signed by me. This My Sister Supreme book will be signed by me. So there you go. Something to think about. So, Christmas is coming for you and for me. All right. Thanks for listening. Thanks for watching. Thanks for subscribing. Thanks for spreading the word. Thanks for liking and all the rest of it. And I will see you down the road.